Hey guys, welcome back to What About AI? Today we're talking about software developers, software engineers, and how they're going to be impacted by all the most recent changes. We also have some insights on the past. So pass it over to Sean to kick
Sure.
things off.
Yes. So, as someone who was a software developer, probably not particularly good when I was doing it, but still have been doing it up to and when basically AI came on the scene. As you can imagine, a lot has changed. I think it was, I'm trying to remember that report, but there was a report that came out was at MIT who talked about basically the adoption of the technology,
Oh yeah, I
like
remember that.
maybe it's like the lack thereof. So they were a report that came out a little while back. We'll try to find the link for that and drop it in description, but it talked about the like what the real impact of AI has been thus far across various different job types. And what I remember from it was the vast majority of them were not really being significantly changed at the time. Of course, this was a little bit ago, but two that were receiving most of the impact. One of those was software development and coding, and couldn't possibly begin to agree more with that based on what we've personally seen it do and the things that we've been building. Because I've been using AI for coding and development now for well over a year. And a year ago, not so great. Like splashes of brilliance, I would say, and you could see the potential, but really just kind of, I would say, not ready for prime time yet there. However, since then, especially with the development of like Claude Code, Sonnet 4.5, now Opus 4.5, total game changers, like night and day different from less than a year ago. So the disruption is real, and there's a lot, I think, folks that have backgrounds like ours that are in software development, coding, probably need to do to prepare for not just what's already here, but also what's coming, I think.
Yeah, it's changing so fast. So the report he mentioned came out like a year ago.
Hmm.
That's that's insanely recent.
Yeah, I know.
And it's changing so rapidly that if you think you know what's available, you don't, unless you just scrolled through X for the day and checked all the major posts from all the development leads at each major shop. So a year ago, it was the real use case I saw in corporate was QA testing. They were using ChatGPT at the time, the latest model at the time, to build better test cases and run standardized QA tests. But no one was really using it aggressively for code, right? There was
Yeah,
still this
the
sentiment that
trust was there.
you couldn't really build good code with AI. 3 years ago it was even worse. Like no one even wanted to touch it. They were using it for like maybe writing end of year reviews, but it wasn't worthy for anything code related. You could maybe drop a copy and paste of your code in and say, hey, find some issues or errors, and it would find some things, but it couldn't fix them. It's changed night and day. And I would say, you've heard all the buzz around Claude Code, I'm sure. It's come so far so fast. I feel like Anthropic, the creators of Claude, took that MIT report and said, this is our action plan, and took it directly to big business and said, this is what we're going to build for you to help resolve some of your needs from a software engineering perspective. And it's grown dramatically. Like the number of clients they have now, all big names, JP Morgan Chase,
Yeah.
Bank of America, like anyone you look at, not just big banks, big companies are using Claude Code now in house. And if you're an engineer and you've not touched it yet, or you're like, it doesn't work for me, you have to try it again because it has grown so much.
Yeah, I think we've seen a bit of that, and maybe we're kind of victims of it ourselves as well, too, at least initially, in that when I mentioned kind of a year ago where it wasn't anywhere near as capable as it is now, a lot of folks like us tried it, and then some of the sentiment I've seen across the industry was just like, this isn't very good, and it maybe inaccurately made the assumption that it's never going to be all that good. But what we've seen in less than that year of development is that change pretty dramatically. And I think a number of the folks that I've worked with, and I've been doing tech consulting work for larger companies these days, but some with some pretty modern and progressive teams, Silicon Valley startup type stuff. And even still within those teams, I've seen some pretty strong aversion to the technology, almost kind of not just not believing it can get there, but kind of resisting it. I think that to me feels like an adapt or die kind of scenario where, if you resist that too long and you fight that and don't kind of ultimately come to the realization that it's here, it's likely here to stay, and that disruption's only going to get more significant, then I think you risk kind of some of the security for your own profession, and it just really like not evolving to what it's likely to become, whether we have control over it or not, unfortunately.
Yeah, and the coin flips, right? So
Yeah.
there's some folks I talk to that are using it for everything. They've basically stopped writing their own code entirely. And honestly, that's probably okay. The key to survive in the not too distant future, like starting now, is to know how to prompt for what you want.
Mm.
So to write a really concise request and to know the framework you want to use, the architecture you want to use, and if you don't know how to do those things, to ask first, what should I build this with? What's the most secure? And ask questions like, what security gaps exist? Because if you don't do that when you're doing, vibe coding, and you hear a lot of people say the phrase AI slop, that's what you'll get. You'll get a very, very large code base that could be simplified very easily with tons of gaps and security risks in it. So if you are using AI almost entirely to code, make sure you're asking follow-up questions to evaluate where there might be security gaps, what could be optimized. Boris Cherny, the head of development for Claude, Anthropic Claude, just launched something called a code simplifier plugin. It's exceptional. I mean, it'll take 10,000 lines of code and bring it down to 6,000, 5,000, based on any repetitive tasks or activities. And that's what the AI systems build now. They just keep tacking on more and more code. They don't really go back and make it more mature or simplify it. And that's the biggest complaint I've heard from developers.
Yeah, well said. So I think it'd be cool for us to unpack a little bit too where we think it's going. So, we talked a little bit about what it's capable of now. We're both actively using it. The last time I built a financial services kind of due diligence tool.
Hold on. He's actively using it off screen. I'm literally running it right now, occasionally
There you
pressing
go.
enter.
There's proof. What I built last. I built the entire thing in like 9 hours, I think, cumulatively. So I added it all up. It was across a couple of days, but when I added up the actual time when Claude Code, not myself, was actually writing the code, that's about how much time it took, which is crazy from start to finish. I still struggle to kind of wrap my head around those kind of numbers, but given the fact that I could do that stuff in a pretty predictable way, I think it'd be cool to hear us unpack a little bit more about like how we think these roles will evolve and what folks who are either have already been affected by this or are in these roles today, like how they should be thinking of how their careers, their roles, how these teams want to are likely to evolve and stuff like that. Like, go ahead. What do you got?
Well, I think there's a bunch there. I think that the evolution is really going to be an adaptation. If you cannot start using these tools in your everyday life, you're going to struggle in your career. So if you're a software engineer right now and you have your own setup and everything's right, your Docker is the way you want it, everything's configured just right, you're probably doing it wrong. Like you don't have to have things just right any longer. You'll still need a lot of support for the near future with graphic arts and UI UX design, but I don't think you're going to have to go that deep on fixing any code yourself or writing a whole lot of code yourself. And there's not a whole lot of value today outside of like personal satisfaction in writing elegant code because the code written by Claude Code or Codex from ChatGPT, or Gemini's anti-gravity, it's good enough. It works. Like it gets the job done. And that all folks care about, all your superiors care about at work, if you're working a corporate job, is whether or not it works,
Exactly.
not how much code is in the code base.
True.
So that's something you really have to think about to make yourself successful go forward. Don't focus on perfect, efficient code. Focus on code that works and doesn't have major security risks or gaps.
Yeah, definitely. Well said. Yeah, thinking through it differently in terms of like how you make your impact and how you do your work is probably a great place to start. I think what we're seeing mostly, and unfortunately this news comes out every day these days, but they're hacking apart workforces, right? They're coming after the most expensive line item on the balance sheet, which is the payroll, right? And that's how much they pay their workforce to do whatever it is these companies do. We can talk about for days how unapologetic they are about that and how that'll create other problems down the line. But the reality of the matter is that's what they're doing. And they're doing it in some of these cases based on what the technology is already capable of. And they're doing it in addition to that based on what it's theoretically going to be capable of. So they're kind of aiming for where it's going to go, which means potential disruption for you, us, everybody who's kind of in this world. So preparing for that as best you can, I think, is a great place to start. And in fact, one guideline, and as we talked about that topic, someone else mentioned to me, and I thought that's probably a good way to think of it. Number one, when it came to like code quality and stuff like that, I was thinking back to like when I was actually writing code and obsessing over every line and how not great that was then. Now, comparing it to what the AI is technically capable of, and sure, it may not be perfect, but to your point, I think functionality is probably what matters most. I've not, and the tools we've built and the products I've sold and stuff like that, have not had too many clients or customers care too much about most of the technicals. They might ask, but for the most part, they don't even honestly know like what question to ask. But the rule of thumb I think that I've heard, and thus far that's turned out to be true, literally in the cases of the tools that we've been building, is even if the code quality that it writes now is not great, chances are a new model's coming right around the corner, and then that can be used to refactor that code. So
That's right.
I'm not saying that to like discourage you from like the art that was writing clean quality code, and like I totally get where you're coming from there. What I'm trying to recommend is like thinking through channeling that energy slightly differently to realizing that like that's not as critically important as it was before, or at least they're fully intending to focus these technical resources and getting that as perfect as it can be. And then that's probably just going to continuously improve. So instead, I would focus your efforts kind of strategically elsewhere and instead leverage the tools and resources to do that type of stuff as much as possible, but along the lines of like what these businesses care about most and where they're planning to make that impact, because that will make you more valuable.
Yeah, and you've heard of the trade-offs between better, faster, cheaper. Companies still want all three, and with AI, there's this belief that they can get it, and they kind of can,
Yeah.
right? So if you're trying to build something, you're going to see more and more teams that are smaller in size, tons of shrinkage. You're going to see, I can't not laugh
Nailed
when I
it.
say shrinkage. Yeah. So corporate shrinkage, you're going to see fewer management layers, right? So if you had three middle managers before a leader for your division or line of business, it's going to be one now, and they're going to be making more decisions. And you're going to see shorter expectations in terms of time of delivery. You can't. There's no more. Oh, it's going to take me 110 story points, or it'll be three sprints. I don't think you can think in those terms anymore. You may have to start. I mean, the agile methodology can be reframed to support everything that's happening with AI, but you really can't talk in very long durations like that anymore without raising an eyebrow or folks asking questions.
Yeah, no, well said and agreed. So, I mean, we've unpacked a couple different topics here, where we've seen the technology already start to make an impact, where it's going. I think that's likely to just continue from here. Why? I think my recommendation or our recommendation is probably to think through kind of what your role has been like in the past and what that role is expected to kind of look like more so moving forward. And I think it's going to be highly unlikely that it doesn't have this technology at the core of what it is that you're doing. Instead of competing against the technology, I think it probably looks more like you as that expert in software engineering figuring out how to get the most out of the technology. Because I remember that being a key kind of cornerstone of that report as well. Also, is in some of these cases the tech is very capable, but companies that are trying to implement it are just not really implementing it all that well. They don't really know how to. And I think it's because they don't have your skills. So if you focus that energy in trying to produce a better return with the technology, I think that makes you potentially a rock star at your company moving forward.
Agreed. Yeah, I think one other big thing to call out is we see where this is going. You probably do too. We've built tools to help everyone that we can. We have a newsletter that we're publishing that's going out every day with specifics for specific job functions and roles. So if you haven't seen that yet, sign up for it. We'll have a weekly version that's free and a daily version that's paid. We're building free resources for folks that have lost their jobs. So if you were recently laid off or you're trying to find support, it's insane trying to navigate the government sites. I mean, just for the state of Pennsylvania, when I went through all this, it took me 6 weeks to figure out how to get everything signed up, get insurance for my family. It's a mess. So we've tried to consolidate all of that for you state by state. That's at joinordie.ai. And we're trying to build really a movement around keeping humanity together because we have to work together to get through this. And that's really the core message.